The call came at 2:47 in the afternoon, right in the middle of a quarterly review that could not wait. Marcus Holt, his assistant, knocked twice before pushing the door open, which he never did during a meeting. That alone told Elliot Crane something was wrong before the man even opened his mouth. "There's a child in the lobby," Marcus said. "She's been there for 40 minutes. She says she needs to speak with you." Elliot did not look up from the figures on the table. "Send her back to whoever brought her." "No one brought her, sir. She came alone. She's 7, maybe 8. A pause. "She has a handwritten note with your name on it." The room had gone quiet. The 3 junior partners sitting across from Elliot exchanged the kind of glance people make when they are pretending not to notice something. Elliot set down his pen. "Tell her to leave the note at reception and go home." Marcus hesitated in a way he almost never did. "I tried. She said she'll wait." Elliot looked up then. He studied Marcus's face, the slight tension around the jaw, the careful blankness in his eyes that meant he was choosing his words. Something about the situation had gotten to Marcus, and Marcus Holt was not a man who got gotten to easily. "Fine," Elliot said. 5 minutes. Put her in the small boardroom. He did not rush. He finished reviewing the page he was on, made 2 notes in the margin, capped his pen, and excused himself from the meeting. He walked down the hall at his normal pace, past the floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the gray November skyline of downtown Halifax. The small boardroom had a glass wall facing the corridor, and he saw her before he opened the door. She was sitting very straight in one of the leather chairs, too tall for her, so her feet did not reach the floor, with a purple backpack on her lap and her hands folded on top of it. She had dark braids tied with white elastics, and she was looking directly at the door, as if she had been watching for him. She did not flinch when he walked in. Most adults flinched, at least a little, when Elliot Crane walked into a room. This girl did not. He sat down across from her. He did not offer a smile. He had found over the years that children responded better to being treated like small adults than to being spoken at in a softened voice. "I'm told you asked for me by name," he said. "Yes." Her voice was steady. "You're Mr. Crane. You own this building. My company leases most of it." She considered that for a moment, as if cataloging the distinction for later. "My mom works for you. Her name is Patrice Odom. She works on the 4th floor in the documentation center." Elliot did not know every employee. He had close to 300 people in the Halifax office alone, but he said nothing and let her continue. "She's been sick," the girl said. "Not sick like a cold, sick like tired all the way through. She doesn't sleep. She works until really late, and then she brings work home and does it at the kitchen table after she thinks I'm in bed." The girl looked at him steadily. "I'm not usually in bed. I just pretend, so she doesn't feel bad." Elliot said nothing. "Last week she fell asleep standing at the stove. She didn't burn herself, but she could have." The girl's voice did not waver, but something in her expression shifted slightly. A tightening around the eyes that she was trying very hard not to show. "I got scared. I've been scared before, but not like that." "What is yours?" Elliot asked. "Cleo." "How old are you, Cleo?" 8. "I'll be 9 in March." He looked at her. She looked back at him. "How did you get here?" he asked. "Bus. I took the 52 from school to Barrington Street, then walked 3 blocks. She said it the way someone reports a fact, not a feat. I looked it up on Google Maps last night. I also looked up your name and what you look like, so I would know who to ask for." Something in Elliot's chest shifted in a way he could not immediately name. "Your mother doesn't know you're here." "No, she'd be upset. She'd think she did something wrong." Cleo looked at him with a seriousness that did not belong on a child's face. "She didn't do anything wrong. She just works really hard and nobody notices." He should have sent her home. He should have called Patrice Odom up from the 4th floor and handed her daughter back to her and gone back to his quarterly review. That was the correct response. That was the logical and appropriate response for a Tuesday afternoon in November. Instead, he said, "What did you want to say to me?" Cleo unzipped her backpack and removed a folded piece of lined paper. She placed it flat on the table between them with both hands, but she did not push it toward him. She kept her fingers on the edges of it. "I wrote it down," she said, "in case I forgot or got nervous." "Did you get nervous?" She thought about it. "A little. In the elevator." He looked at the paper, then back at her. "You can tell me yourself if you want." She took a breath, one careful, deliberate breath, and said, "Can you please give my mom 1 day off, just one? Not a vacation day, because she won't take it if she thinks it's coming off her total, a real day, where you tell her not to come in and she has to listen." She paused. "She listens to you. She talks about what you say sometimes. At dinner, she listens to you more than she listens to me." That last sentence landed differently than the rest. It was said without accusation, simply as a statement of fact, but it stayed in the air between them. "Why one day?" Elliot asked. "Because I want to make her breakfast," Cleo said. "I can make toast and scrambled eggs. I've been practicing. And I want her to eat it at the actual table without her laptop open." She looked down at her hands for the first time since he'd sat down. "I don't think she remembers what that's like." Elliot sat back in his chair. He had been in dozens of difficult conversations. He had let people go, rejected proposals that had taken years to build, delivered news that had changed the course of people's careers and lives. He was not a man who found conversations difficult, but he was not sure, in that moment, what to do with what this child was giving him. "Tell me about your mom," he said. "Not about work. Tell me about her." He looked at him carefully, as if assessing whether this was a trick. Then she seemed to decide it wasn't. "She's funny," Cleo said. "She makes up songs about things. Like if I don't want to eat my vegetables, she'll do a whole song about the broccoli being sad. She has a terrible singing voice, but she does it anyway. She used to do that all the time." A small pause. "She doesn't really do it anymore." Elliot said nothing. "She's really good at fixing things. She fixed our kitchen tap herself with YouTube. She fixes my toys when they break. She fixed our neighbor Mr. Achibi's gate because he's 91 and he couldn't do it himself." Cleo looked at the table. "She's really good at looking after everyone. I don't think anyone looks after her." The room was very quiet. Elliot stood up. He walked to the window at the far end of the boardroom, the small one that faced the parking structure, not the city, and he stood there for a moment with his back to her. He had known a woman once who was good at looking after everyone. He had known her very well, and he had been too young to understand what that cost her, and then one day she was simply not there anymore, and he had spent the better part of his adult life not thinking about it too carefully. His mother's name was Edith Crane. She had worked the reception desk at a law firm for 22 years and raised Elliot and his sister on her own after their father left, and she had done it with the same quiet exhaustion Cleo had just described, the kind that doesn't announce itself, that just accumulates silently until the person carrying it is gone before you knew to be worried. She died of a stroke at 53. He was 19. He turned back around. "Cleo," he said, "I want you to go back down to reception and tell Marcus, the man who brought you here, that you need to wait for someone. Don't leave the building." She looked at him. "Are you going to call my mom?" "Yes." The girl absorbed this. Her chin came up slightly. "Are you going to tell her I did something wrong?" "No," Elliot said. "I'm going to tell her that I need to speak with her. That's all." Something shifted very slightly in her expression. Not quite relief, but the absence of a particular kind of bracing. "Okay," she said. She slid off the chair, picked up her backpack, and zipped it shut. At the door she stopped. "Mr. Crane?" "Yes. She's not a complainer, in case you were wondering. She's not the kind of person who asks for things." She held his gaze with a directness that was almost uncomfortable. "That's why I'm here instead." Then she left. Elliot called Marcus directly rather than going through the reception system. "Find an employee in the documentation center, 4th floor, Patrice Odom. Tell her I need to see her. Don't tell her anything else, and don't let it seem like a disciplinary matter. Find a way to make it sound routine." He paused. "And Cleo is waiting downstairs. Make sure she has water and something to eat if she wants it. The girl? Yes." There was a beat of silence. Marcus, to his credit, did not ask for clarification. Elliot went back to the quarterly review and wrapped it up in 12 minutes, cutting 2 agenda items to be dealt with by email. Then he returned to the small boardroom, opened his laptop, and pulled up Patrice Odom's employment file. He had asked HR to send it before he'd left the room with Cleo. He did not know why he'd done that. Habit, maybe. Instinct to have context before a conversation. But reading it now, he understood something he hadn't before he'd met the daughter. Patrice Odom, 34 years old. Hired 4.5 years ago as a documentation coordinator. Promoted 18 months later to senior coordinator. No disciplinary issues. Attendance record that was essentially perfect, barring a 3-day absence 2 years prior. A note in the file indicated she'd taken care of a hospitalized family member. Every performance review was rated strong or exceptional. Her supervisor's comments used words like reliable, thorough, goes above and beyond. Goes above and beyond. Elliot had used that phrase himself. He had read it in review after review without much thought, the way you stop registering wallpaper after a while. But he was reading it differently now, thinking about a woman at a kitchen table at midnight with a laptop open, thinking about a child lying in bed in the next room pretending to be asleep so her mother wouldn't feel guilty. Goes above and beyond. He wondered what Patrice Odom thought that phrase was worth. He wondered if she knew anyone had read it. She knocked at exactly the time Marcus had said she would, which told him she was punctual even when anxious. And she was anxious. He could see it in the careful way she held herself when she entered the room, the practiced neutral expression that was doing its best to cover a level of worry she had no information to explain. She was slight, with close-cropped natural hair and intelligent eyes that moved quickly around the room before settling on him. She was wearing a gray cardigan that had started the day pressed and was now slightly rumpled at the sleeves. She had the look of someone who had been sharp that morning and had spent the hours since trying to stay that way. "Mr. Crane," she said. "I wasn't. Marcus said you needed to see me." "Sit down, please," he said. "You're not in trouble." Something in her shoulders shifted, almost imperceptibly. She sat. "I want to tell you something first," Elliot said, "and then I'm going to tell you something else, and I need you to hear the first part properly before we get to the second." Patrice Odom looked at him steadily. "All right, I looked at your file today. I don't review individual employee files regularly. It isn't how I spend my time. I have managers for that. But I looked at yours today, and I want to say something that probably should have been said through your supervisory chain a long time ago." He paused. "You've done exceptional work since you joined this company. The consistency in your reviews is not common. The kind of reliability you've shown is not something every employer knows to recognize or value, and I think it's very likely that no one has told you clearly enough that it is recognized." He looked at her directly. "Consider this me telling you that." She was quiet for a moment. He watched her process it, the slight widening of her eyes and then the careful closing down of it, the work she was doing to stay composed. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was controlled. "The second thing," Elliot folded his hands on the table. "Your daughter came to see me today." The composure broke. Not dramatically. It was a very small break, just a swift involuntary intake of breath, and a split second of something unguarded moving across her face. Her hand came up to her mouth and then she pulled it back down. "Cleo," she said. "She's here?" "She's—" She started to stand. "She's downstairs. She's safe. Marcus is with her. Please sit down." She sat, but now she was gripping the edge of the table. "She took the bus. She's 8 years old. Her voice broke slightly on the last word and she stopped herself. "She took the 52 to Barrington Street," Elliot said, "and walked 3 blocks. She looked up the route the night before and researched what I looked like so she'd know who to ask for. She waited in the lobby for 40 minutes without making a fuss, and then she sat across from me in this room and told me things about you that your employment file does not capture." Patrice was looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. The shock was still there, but underneath it something else was working. "What did she say?" she asked quietly. "She said you make songs about broccoli to get her to eat vegetables, that you fixed your neighbor's gate because he's 91 and couldn't do it himself, that you're very good at looking after everyone." He let that sit for a moment, and she said she doesn't think anyone looks after you. The silence in the room was very complete. Patrice Odom looked at the window. Her throat moved. After a moment she turned back to him. "She shouldn't have done that," she said, but the words had no real weight behind them. She knew, even as she said it, that they weren't quite true. "Perhaps not," Elliot said, "but she did, and what she asked for was very specific." "What did she ask for?" "She asked me to give you a day off. A real one," her words, "not charged to vacation time. A day where you had to listen because I told you to." Patrice blinked. Something flickered across her face that was almost a laugh and almost something else entirely. "She said," Elliot continued, "that she wants to make you breakfast. Toast and scrambled eggs. She said she's been practicing." The almost law became something that was not a laugh at all. Patrice Odom looked down at the table and pressed her lips together, and Elliot Crane, who did not typically accommodate people's emotions, who was known, in fact, for a certain impatience with the time that feelings took, did not say anything. He waited. After a moment she looked up. Her eyes were very bright. "She's been practicing," Patrice repeated, as if she needed to say it out loud to understand it. "That's what she told me. I didn't know that." "I don't think she wanted you to. I think she wanted it to be a surprise." Patrice was quiet for a moment. "She worries about me," she said finally. "I try to keep it from her. I try very hard." She paused. "I thought I was doing a decent job." You probably are, Elliot said. She seems like a child who would worry regardless. Some children are like that. They watch and they notice and they carry things quietly. A pause. She told me you used to make songs about things, that you don't do that as much anymore. Patrice looked at him. No, she said. I don't, I suppose. Elliot stood and went to the window, the same one he'd stood at an hour before. I had a mother who worked very hard, he said. Not as a disclosure. More as a fact he was setting down on the table. She didn't complain. She was not the kind of person who asked for things. I did not understand, when I was young, what that cost her. By the time I was old enough to understand it, there was nothing I could do with the understanding. He paused. I am not telling you that to make a point. I'm telling you because I want you to know why I'm inclined to take your daughter's request seriously. He turned around. You have Thursday and Friday off, he said. Paid. Cleared through HR before the end of today. You won't need to account for it. Your supervisor will be told only that it was pre-approved at the management level. Patrice stared at him. That's 4 days with the weekend, he said. I would suggest using them. Mr. Crane, I have a project deadline next. I know. I reviewed your current workload when I pulled your file. Your deliverables for the Abrams contract are in good shape. Matthews can cover the flagging portion for 2 days. It will be fine. He sat back down. I'm not asking, Ms. Odom. I'm telling you, this is the part where you listen because I said so. He said it without particular warmth, the way he said most things, but something in it made her breath catch. She looked at him for a long moment. Okay, she said finally. It came out smaller than she'd intended. Good. She stood slowly, still slightly dazed. At the door she stopped. Mr. Crane. She turned. Did she seem? Was she okay? When she was here? She was remarkably composed, Elliot said. She told me the bus route without being asked. She had her points in order. She maintained eye contact and didn't fidget. Something in Patrice's face opened up in a way that was almost painful to witness. Pure, uncomplicated love for the person being described. She's 8, she said quietly. I know. He paused. She's something else, your daughter. Patrice Odom pressed her lips together, nodded once, and left. Elliot sat in the boardroom for a few minutes after she'd gone. He thought about Edith Crane, at 53, at a kitchen table. He could still picture clearly. The yellow laminate, the coffee mug with the chipped handle she refused to throw out, the stack of papers that was always there, always partially worked through. He thought about himself at 15, at 17, at 19. Walking past that table so many times, so certain the papers would always be there, so certain there was time. He had become, in the years since, the kind of man who built systems, who put structures in place, who understood that a company was only as good as the people inside it, and that people who burned out quietly were a failure of leadership, not a failure of will. He had overhauled scheduling practices, pushed through better parental leave provisions, required that managers take their own vacation time. He had done it because it was good business. He had done it because the numbers supported it. He had told himself that was reason enough. He was aware, sitting in the small boardroom on a Tuesday afternoon in November, that he had not been entirely honest about the reasons. He picked up his phone and sent 2 messages. The first was to Marcus, telling him that Miss Odom would be collecting her daughter from the lobby and asking him to make sure they had the elevator when they were ready to leave. The second was to HR, authorizing the 2 days of supplemental paid leave. Then he put his phone down and looked at the folded piece of lined paper that was still on the table. Cleo had left it. He was not sure if she'd forgotten it or left it deliberately. He unfolded it. The handwriting was careful and large, the letters slightly uneven in the way that 8-year-old handwriting is, not because the child doesn't try, but because the effort is visible in every stroke. Dear Mr. Crane, my name is Cleo Odom. My mom works for you. I am writing to ask if you could please let her have a day off. Not a vacation day. A real day. She is very tired and I don't think she knows it. She is a really good mom and she tries very hard. I think she needs someone to tell her she can stop for a minute. Thank you for reading this. I know you are busy. I looked you up and it seems like you work a lot too. Sincerely, Cleo. P.S. I am coming in person because I think letters are easier to ignore. He read the postscript twice. Then, for the first time in a very long time, Elliot Crane sat alone in a quiet room and felt something loosen in his chest that he had not known was tight. He did not see Patrice Odom again for 3 weeks. When he did, it was in passing. She was in the lobby on her way to lunch with a colleague, and he was on his way out to a meeting. They exchanged the brief, nodded acknowledgement of 2 people who have had an unusual moment and are not sure what to do with it in ordinary light. But the following week there was an envelope on his desk, unmarked, left with reception. Inside was a drawing, crayon, on white construction paper. It showed two people sitting at a table. One was a small figure with dark braids, and one was a taller figure with a coffee mug. Between them on the table were two plates which Elliot took to be scrambled eggs. In the upper right corner of the drawing, there were yellow lines radiating from a circle, which he took to be a sun, which he took to mean morning. In the bottom corner, in careful uneven letters, it worked. Elliot put the drawing in the top right drawer of his desk, under his backup reading glasses, and the letter of incorporation from 2014 that he kept for no clear reason. He did not throw it away. In the months that followed, Elliot did something that surprised management team. He contracted an external HR consultancy to conduct a staff well-being audit. Not the standard engagement survey that produced numbers and sat in reports, but a real one. Structured one-on-ones, anonymous submissions, a frank look at actual workload against official hours. He sat in on several of the feedback sessions himself, which was unprecedented, and made people visibly nervous at first, and then, when they understood he was actually listening, something else. What he heard was not dramatically different from what he'd expected to hear. The shapes of exhaustion were consistent. The language of it was familiar. I don't want to seem like I can't handle it. I don't want to be the one who asks for help. I don't want anyone to think I'm not committed. The same words in different voices, over and over, from people who came in early and stayed late, and answered emails at midnight and told themselves it was temporary. It would ease up soon. There was a deadline coming, and after that it would be different. He knew those words. He had used them himself. He implemented changes in the quarter that followed. Some of them were structural. A hard stop policy on work communications after 7 p.m., mandatory carryover of unused vacation days, a formal workload review built into the quarterly process. Some of them were cultural and harder to enforce, but not impossible. Language in team meetings, expectations from leadership, the particular signal sent when the person at the top of the organization is seen to leave the office before 8 on a Wednesday. He did not announce that any of this had started in the small boardroom on a Tuesday in November, with a child who had taken the 52 to Barrington Street. But Marcus knew. Marcus knew everything. The following March, there was a cake in the staff kitchen on the 4th floor. Pink frosting, slightly uneven, and a number 9 made of candles. A card was passed around and signed by what seemed like half the documentation center. Elliot did not know this until Marcus mentioned it in passing at the end of the week. Patrice Odom's daughter's birthday, Marcus said. Apparently, Miss Odom brought her in to see the office. The kid apparently had quite an experience here a few months ago. Said Elliot. She apparently told several people on the 4th floor, and I quote, I came here in November and talked to the big boss, and he was really okay, actually. Elliot looked up from his monitor. She said, actually. That was the direct quote as it was reported to me. He looked back at his monitor. Good to know. I also heard, Marcus continued, apparently not finished, that the child personally advocated for the sprinkles on the pink frosting and refused to be talked out of it on the grounds that, and again, quoting, it's not a real birthday cake without sprinkles. Is that all, Marcus? That is all, sir. Marcus left. Elliot sat at his desk for a moment in the particular silence of a Friday afternoon, the city going gray and quiet outside the window. He thought about the drawing in the top right drawer. He thought about yellow crayon lines radiating from a circle. He thought about morning and scrambled eggs and a woman who had stopped making songs about broccoli and had, he genuinely hoped, started making them again. He pulled up his calendar. He had not taken a full week off in 4 years. He had the theoretical vacation days. They accumulated and carried over in precisely the system he had implemented. He had simply never used them. He looked at the following month. Then he opened a new message to Marcus and typed, block the week of the 14th. No exceptions. I'll be out of office. He hit send before he could think about it further. Then he picked up his phone and called his sister in Vancouver, whom he spoke to every few weeks, but had not visited in over 2 years. She picked up on the second ring. Elliot, she said, the way people say a name when they're surprised and pleased at the same time. Is everything okay? Everything's fine, he said. I'm calling because I have the week of the 14th free. I thought I'd come out. A silence on the other end that was made of the best kind of shock. You're serious. I'm serious, Elliot. Her voice had something in it he had not heard in a long time. I'll make breakfast. A real one. The whole thing, eggs and everything. You just have to show up. He thought of a crayon sun in the corner of a piece of construction paper. He thought of two figures at a table, and plates between them, and the very simple fact of being somewhere at the same time as someone you love without looking at a screen. "I'll be there," he said.